YA stuff that's written about the Fae, and it's not my favorite. So I'd kind of avoided avoided that series.
Wait. I have to interrupt. It's not your favorite.
Favorite.
Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a weekly podcast for book lovers by book lovers. Build your to-be-read list with Sadie, Liz, Virginia, Fiona, and Corrine from the Port Moody Public Library. Warning, this podcast contains strong opinions and may cause an increase in your library holds list.
Hello and welcome to Keep It Fictional, the book podcast by book lovers for book lovers. As we approach Canadian Thanksgiving, the question of gratitude becomes one we're more preoccupied with. What are we thankful for? Is it family, friends, a good job, a roof over our heads? There are so many things that we can be thankful for. But this Thanksgiving season, my book friends and I are going to talk about authors we are thankful for. I'm excited to find out who my book friends are thankful for and why they're thankful for those authors. So let's get into it. I think we're going to start with Virginia today. Who have you got for us?
All right. So the first author that came to mind when I saw this topic was Lavie Tidhar. And I have alluded to this author before a number of times on this podcast, but I've never talked about one of his books at length. So this is the perfect episode to introduce you to this amazing author if you have not encountered his works before. Now, just a bit about Tidhar first. He is an Israeli-British author born in Israel and then lived in many places, including South Africa, the UK, Laos, and Vanuatu. In 1998, he published his first book, which is a collection of poetry, which he hasn't done since then, but he does sneaks in poetry every now and then into his books. In 2010, he wrote his first debut novel, which turns into a trilogy. It is a steampunk series called The Bookman. And then in 2011, he wrote Osama, which he described as a film noir, nonfiction, alternative history, and international thriller. And that book won him the World Fantasy Award. He went on to create many award winners and nominees, including Best Novella in 2012 British Fantasy Award for Goro and the Pot-Bellied God. He won a John Campbell Memorial Award for Best Science Fiction Novel in 2017 for Central Station. And he wrote many other books, including A Man Lies Dreaming, which he pitched to his agent as Adolf Hitler Private-Eyed, which made his agent laugh and told him, yeah, no one is going to buy that, but sure, go ahead and write it. And he did, and somebody did buy it, thankfully. He wrote a retelling of the Jesus story, but Jesus now knows Kung Fu, so he wrote Jesus and the Eightfold Path. He wrote The Big Blind, which is about a poker-playing nun, and he has 100 more short stories published in print and online science fiction and fantasy magazines. He had a graphic novel series called Atla. He has a kid's book called Candy, or in the US, The Candy Mafia. He also has a weekly column that he writes short story in one of the daily paper in Vanuatu in Blislama, which is his third language, the official language of the island. He has an animation studio that does studio and games. He has a share column in the Washington Post with Silvia Moreno Garcia that recommends science fiction, fantasy, and horror stories. This person is like unstoppable. And I got to wonder, do you sleep at all? Because I don't know how you can come up with so many things, and just he has his hands in everything. It's amazing. My first Lavie Tidhar book, my first introduction to him was By Force Alone, which is a retelling of a King Arthur story. Now, I don't care about King Arthur at all, and I don't think he does either. But when he was forced to read some King Arthur stories, he realized that this alleged tale of honor and chivalry is awful. These people are like gangsters. They're like awful people. So he ended up rewriting it in a Godfather Scarface style, and that's what he got, By Force Alone. I was really intrigued by just the way he retold the story, by his writing. It's just so much fun, and as usual, most of his stories has like a political bent in it, which I really enjoy. And so I went on to read some of his older works. I picked up Central Station, which I think is probably his more well-known novel. And it's very different from By Force Alone. This is definitely a very science fiction. And it's kind of my entry into, maybe for lack of a better term, like more thoughtful science fiction. I was very much a space opera person, but this book kind of made me look at some other different kinds of science fiction stories, which I'm really thankful for. And then, I've been trying to keep up with Tidhar. As mentioned, he's so prolific. He just writes so much stuff. So it's hard to keep up with him. Also, the fact that he is UK based, which means many of his books are not always available immediately here to us, which is annoying. One of my favorite of his book is probably The Escapement, which came out a couple years ago. It's a really, really touching story about the length a father would go to for his son. But as he said, he also called this a clown Western because this is a book set in sort of a Western kind of world with clowns. And how do you make a story with clowns a heartfelt story? That is only something that Tidhar can do. It's just absolutely amazing. And as his website said, he works across genres. He combined detective and thriller modes with poetry, science fiction, and historical and autobiographical material. And he always ends up setting some of his books in places that are don't usually represented in science fictions, which I really, really appreciate. There is more, because Tidhar is not just one of my favorite authors and just a genius, as Daryl Gregory called him. But there's another reason why I'm talking about him today on this kind of Thanksgiving theme kind of episode, is because in addition to being an amazing author, he is also a tireless advocate for science fiction and fantasy authors and stories from all over the world. It's always a delight to find that an author is also an avid reader, that they're not just passionate about the craft of writing, but they're also really passionate and excited when they read stories and books by other people that they love. And Tidhar is definitely an avid reader, and he wants you and me to know about all these great authors that may not have had the exposure that they deserve yet in sort of North America, in the UK. And he wanted to bring these people to our attention. So he is also the editor of numerous anthologies to highlight that global science fiction and fantasy scene. In 2009, he started his first volume of the Apex Book of World Science Fiction, which comes in 5 volumes. And of course, he is also the author of 2, soon to be 3 volumes, the 3rd volume coming out in December, of the Best of World SF. And this all came when he recognized the irony of how there was this thing called the Worldcon, which started in 1939 in New York, a small science fiction fan convention that happened to take place during the World's Fair. And so they call it the Worldcon. But then, of course, he realized that this so-called Worldcon really is just Anglo-American. Like, there is no world in this Worldcon at all. It's not until 2015 when an award that they give out actually went to a novel that is not originally published in English. So because of that, he tried to pitch to publishers just this idea of let's make an anthology of international speculative fiction. Let's put that out there. But either he get no response from publishers, or one time he said he got a rejection in under an hour. And he was just yeah, people are not interested, which of course makes him really angry. So he persevered, and he finally has all these different anthologies out. All the stories are personally chosen by Lavie Tidhar, and it includes some authors that now are a little bit more well-known, like Sylvia Moreno Garcia, San Cho, Aliette de Bodard, Tate Thompson, many of the authors that we mentioned on this show before, but also many authors that write some in English and many of them translated. And he also makes sure that the authors and the translators, they both get paid the same, because he recognized how important for both of them to make these stories available to us. So I am just so grateful, I think, for him for being this proponent of stories from around the world and just giving everybody that coverage and that boost. I just think this is someone who just does it all. So for this episode, I got caught up on some of his other books, and I want to talk about his latest, one of his latest, because another one, of course, not available yet here, but he has not 1, but 2 books out this year. But the one that just came out in the beginning of September is The Circumference of the World by Lavie Tidhar. Now, Tidhar said that this book was inspired by a what-if question. What if L. Ron Hubbard was right? What if a pulp science fiction writer, who is also, of course, a founder of a very questionable church, is write about some stuff, like write about the origins of the universe and write about the beginning of humanity. So that is what this story is kind of centered around, a pulpy science fiction novel that may or may not exist. It's called Lodestars and it's by Eugene Charles Hartley. And this book allegedly exists, but not many people have seen it. Not many people have owned it. It is a book that in this novel, at least 4 people are looking for. First, we have Delia, who's born on Vanuatu, and then she moved to London and married a fellow mathematician named Levi. Levi is sure that his career is coming to an end because all famous mathematicians discover what made them famous before they turn 30. And Levi is almost 30. So he is very upset, he's depressed, and he became obsessed with finding the thing that will make his career. And he believes that it is this book called Lodestar by Eugene Charles Hartley. He's convinced that Hartley has indeed discovered the nature of the universe, the mystery, and he has encoded what he knows in his book. If only Levi could get a copy, then he can decode this mystery, and that would be his contribution to science. And weirdly, Delia sort of remembers seeing maybe a copy of this book in her childhood home on the island. She kind of remembers it. And of course, Levi just couldn't believe that his wife actually has once upon a time held a copy of this book. Then Levi disappeared and he went missing. Now, Delia knows that it must have something to do with this book. So she hires someone to look for Levi. She wants him to come home, of course, but, really, as long as he's okay. She just wants to know that he is doing okay, and that would be enough for her. But instead of hiring a detective, she decided to hire Daniel Chase, who is a rare bookseller who keeps reminding her that, I don't look for missing people, I look for books. But Delia thinks that he is the right person for the job. But then before Daniel could begin, he was kidnapped by Oscar Lance, a billionaire who's also looking for the novel. Oscar Lance believes that this book, Lodestar, is not just a book, but it's a device, what he called the occlusion device. And somehow this book, this device, is going to help prevent him from being devoured by these aliens, or these, what they call the eaters, another theory that Hartley proposed in his book and his church. So once again, you got Tidhar, who combines all these weird, unrelated threads. We have a story about a missing person, a mysterious rare book that may or may not exist, paying homage to the golden age science fiction writers and this church of all-seeing eyes, and then the meaning of the universe. Everything combined, all of this into a strange but intriguing story that calls to the question, what is reality and what do we really know about it? I just love all the banana pants theories in the book, which of course end up being true. What if it's true? And the story is structured in a way that you get all the different points of view, and we sort of move from one part of the story to the other, with Delia and her childhood, and then her in London, and then Daniel, the rare bookseller, Oscar, and also in the end, Hartley, the author of Lodestars, who hangs out and in conversation with some of his peers, who include some real science fiction authors like Heinlein and Frederick Poe. It is so much fun, and it's of course told in Tidhar's signature, very poetic, very sparse kind of prose. And as usual, when you open up a Tidhar book, you just never know what you're gonna get. And as Ian McDonald said, he's like a genre entirely on his own. And NPR said he's a genius as conjuring realities that are just 2 steps to the left of our own. It's always very sci-fi, but it's also weirdly like our real world. It's just it's strange, but also kind of realistic at the same time. It's just a special author that does something really special every time he writes. So I am so thankful for all the amazing work that you do, Lavie Tidhar. And I think for anyone who is intrigued by what this author is all about. I would say, I don't know if there's a book that is like the best book to start with, like he has a massive catalog for you to pick from. But I would say pick the premise that interests you because he has so many strange premises that all sound really, really interesting. Pick the one that interests you and you never know what you're going to find. And I think that is the fun about reading his book. So his latest, The Circumference of the World, and that is by Lavie Tidhar.
Thank you, Virginia. That sounds fantastic. And I think I just added another couple books to my TBR. So next we've got Sadie. Sadie, who are you thankful for today?
So yeah, I actually really struggled with this topic. I feel like a lot of the authors that I really, really love and I'm really, really thankful for, I've already talked about pretty much all of their books. And even if I hadn't talked about one of their books, I probably didn't need to bring another Kelly Armstrong or another Leigh Bardugo book onto this show. It's just not necessary. I have sold enough books for them and they don't need the publicity anymore. The book that I did end up picking was actually one that I didn't consider for quite a while because I thought I'd already talked about it. And I was like racking my brain trying to figure out when I had talked about this, why it was not listed on our list of books that we talked about. What I can figure out now, I think it must have been for one of our Booktoberfest or readathons. And I mentioned it in like just a quick kind of, this is what I'm going to be reading for this readathon or for Booktoberfest. So I have not done a full talk about this book. So I'm very excited to talk about it today. I absolutely love this book. I'll get into that a little bit after I do the review of it. But the author that I'm going to be talking about is Julie Kagawa. Kagawa is a Japanese-American young adult writer. She is most well known actually for her Iron Fae series. And that's a very, very big series. I think there's 15 novels and novellas involved in it. It's quite a large series. And it revolves around a teenage girl who learns that she's actually the daughter of a fairy king and is being used as a pawn in a deadly war. I actually just started reading that one. I considered talking about it for this episode, and I started reading it, and I think I will finish it, but it didn't hook me as much as the book that I'm going to talk about did. And I was really happy when I saw this book because I had looked into Julie Kagawa's work before, and it did revolve a lot around the Fae, which is not always my favorite kind of trope or theme in YA fiction. There's a lot of YA stuff that's written about the Fae, and it's not my favorite. So I'd kind of avoided that series.
Wait. I have to interrupt. It's not your favorite.
Favorite. So Julie Kagawa, apart from the Iron Fae series, does actually have quite a few other series. She has The Blood of Eden, which is sort of a post-apocalyptic vampire story. And there are 4 books in that series. She has the Talon series, which is a dragon-focused series. She has 5 books in that series. And then the series that I am going to be talking about, there are 3 books. I wish that there were more because I just absolutely love the world that she creates. I absolutely love the characters that she creates. And I really wanted more in that world and wanted more to kind of read about. So the book that I am going to be talking about today is The Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. And The Shadow of the Fox starts 1,000 years ago. In the land of Iwagato, the holder of the Scroll of 1,000 Prayers has summoned the great kami dragon. When the dragon is summoned, he will grant the holder one wish. The holder wishes for power and control. And as a result, Iwagato is plunged into a time of chaos and destruction for many, many years. Eventually, the people of Iwagato find a tentative peace and continue on with their lives. And while no one ever really forgets about the dark times, the great kami dragon and the Scroll of 1,000 Prayers are turned more into a legend than into an actual reality or history. However, there are some who have never forgotten what has happened. And so to prevent the same thing from happening again, they split the Scroll of 1,000 Prayers into 3 pieces, hiding each piece in a different secret location across the world. But it is almost time for the great kami dragon to rise again. And those who seek to claim the wish for themselves, will not let anything or anyone stand in their way. All of this, however, doesn't really mean much to Yumeko. She's heard the legends of the dragon and the wish, of course. She actually knows the stories really, really well. Her teachers and her adopted family, the monks at the Silent Wind Temple, have made sure of this. They've made sure that she's studied the stories. She knows the history. But myths and legends about thousand-year-old wishes, they're not really that fun. And Yumeko would much rather sneak around the temple getting into trouble. Because Yumeko loves mischief. She loves to get into trouble. It's kind of just in her nature, and she struggles not to get into trouble. Because Yumeko is not entirely human. Yumeko is half human and half kitsune, which is a fox yokai or demon. Now, while Yumeko looks mostly human, she does have some fox features, as well as a fox's love of mischief and a power over illusions. Now, Master Asai, who has often warned her to keep her kitsune abilities hidden, tells her that not everyone will look kindly on the fact that she's half demon. So Yumeko spends her time in the temple doing her best to hide that side of her, and more often than not, just playing pranks of illusion on the monks around her. Kage Tatsumi has been trained as a weapon for the Shadow Clan. He's been taught to kill. He's been taught to have no emotions, because emotions mean weakness. And if Kage shows any weakness inside or out, then he will never stand a chance against the greatest threat that he faces. The threat that he carries with him every single day of his life. In a very literal way, the threat is the sword that he carries, that he has been trained to carry and trained to use. A sword that imbues him with incredible strength and fighting ability that allows him to kill most yokai and demons that he comes across. And the reason that it does this is because the sword is actually inhabited by a very powerful demon itself, a demon which has the ability to take over Kage's mind and soul if he ever lets it. And so, to protect himself, he buries all of his emotions and acts as the perfect demon-killing machine that he was created to be. The lives of Yumeko and Kage should probably never have crossed paths. And 100 years earlier, they probably wouldn't have. However, as the time of the Great Kami Dragon approaches, everything begins to change. Yumeko is out in the forest that surrounds the temple when she smells smoke. She rushes back home to find that the only home she has ever known is burning to the ground. As she rushes closer, she realizes not only is the temple on fire, but it is actually under attack by the most gruesome and biggest demon that Yumeko has ever laid eyes on. Using the only power she has, the power of illusion, she sneaks inside of the temple and finds Master Asao and the rest of the monks fighting there for their lives. As she tries to figure out how she can help them, Master Asao pulls her aside, and in a rush, he tells her that myths that she's heard her whole life are real, and that the Silent Winds Temple is one of the 3 hiding spots for the Scroll of 1,000 Prayers. This piece of the scroll must be protected at all costs, and it is now up to Yumeko to be its protector and to deliver it safely to another temple where it can be hidden once again. Asao has just enough time to thrust the scroll into Yumeko's hands before he is killed. Yumeko runs, leaving behind the only home and the only family that she has ever known to be burned to the ground. She runs and she runs out of the burning temple into the forest and quite literally right into Kage Tatsumi. Now, Kage had been sent to the temple to retrieve the scroll. He was going to take it by force if necessary, but when he arrives, he realizes that he is too late. Now, having no one else in the world, Yumeko knows that she will never make it safely to the Steel Feather Temple on her own. And so she makes a deal with Kage. She doesn't tell him that she has the scroll, but she tells him that she knows where it is. And if he helps her and protects her on the way to the temple, then she will tell him where the scroll is and he can have it. Oblivious to the fact that Yumeko herself is carrying the scroll, Cage agrees, and the two set off on a journey across Uegato, filled with dangers, a lot of lies, a lot of demons, and some weird unknown power that is kind of controlling the situation, but no one really knows exactly what it is or exactly how much of the situation is being controlled by it. So that is The Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. It is the first book in a trilogy. I think that without giving too much away, the ending of this trilogy affected me more than I thought it would. I hated it and I loved it all at the same time. It's worth it. I think that it is worth reading through because the characters are so fun. The characters are so nuanced. They have kind of all of these different parts to them. I loved the incorporation of the Japanese myths and legends and the Japanese language into the story. I read one review that said Kagawa never apologizes or takes unnecessary time to explain the use of the Japanese words that she includes. She doesn't try to handhold people through the unknown language. She just puts it into the book as if it's meant to be there, and it works so well. And if the reader is curious about what that specific word means, then it's up to us to kind of go and figure that out and look it up. And I think that language addition just added so much to the story. It was a part of the world that I've always been really interested in and a part of mythology that I've always been really interested in. I've read a little bit about Japanese mythology, but not a lot. I believe that some people on their podcast are quite versed in Japanese history and knowledge. And so I might talk to them at some point about more information as well. But yeah, I absolutely love the book. I wish that there was more, as I said. I just wish that she wrote more in this world and kind of in this mythology because it's so rich and there's so much to it. The character of Yumeko is very sympathetic and fun. She starts out the story very, very naive, never having left the temple, not really knowing anything about the world, being very kind of carefree and just into mischief and playing pranks. And she's very, very quickly, as her whole world kind of comes crashing down around her, have to figure out what exactly the world is and how she fits into it. There's obviously more information that she learns as she goes along about who she is, about who her family is, about how she ended up being kind of left at this temple to be raised by the monks. And so, yeah, there's all these kind of backstories that you get. One character that I haven't mentioned, but who actually plays quite a big role, is a young maid in the royal palace, Suki, who at the very beginning of the book, I'm not giving anything away because it starts in the first chapter, she's killed. And she spends the entire book series as a ghost and kind of helping our main characters as she can and playing a bigger role in this story than she ever thought she was going to. And so there's all of these kind of different parts of the story that I think take the full series to wrap up and to connect to each other. I appreciate that it is 3 books because I think that in those 3 books, she's able to bring all of those different pieces together without drawing the story out. As someone who loves series, I see a series that has 15 books. I'm like, that's awesome. That's so much to read. But at the same time, I question whether it's necessary for there to be that many books. And so I'm a big fan of a nice trilogy that is sort of going to be wrapped up in it. So yeah, so that is my recommendation. Julie Kagawa as the author that I'm thankful for, and The Shadow of the Fox as the book that I would recommend.
Thanks so much, Sadie. That sounds like a series definitely to check out. I'm interested in Japan and Japanese culture, so that is one I may have to check out. So now let's move on to our existential question of the episode. And in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we're just going to go simple. What's something that you're thankful for? I can go first. It is kind of, I don't know, it feels a little silly, but I'm really thankful for my dog. He is just a small, fluffy little ball of delight. And when I am stressed out, or even when I'm happy, it's just great to have a little friend there with me to share in the joys and comfort through the sorrows. He is just a little light in my life.
Oh, you all know what I'm going to say. You know, If you're playing the Keep It Fictional drinking game, you know what I'm going to say. I'm thankful for BTS. I love them so much. I'm specifically thankful today to one of the members, Min Yoongi, who gave us a wonderful series of concerts and content before starting his obligatory military service, which he started yesterday. It's fine and is going to be gone until 2025. But he made sure that we all had wonderful memories before he left. And so I'm very thankful for all the joy and happiness that they bring into my life.
I'm going to go super cliche because I feel like I have to. And it's also very true. I'm thankful for my daughter. She came into my life almost 2 years ago, and she's hilarious and ridiculous and loving. And every day she makes me smile and laugh and often cry, not in the good ways, but she has pushed me to ways that I never thought I would. Her current favorite thing to do, my mother-in-law found a little people that looks exactly like Tyler. And so she carries it around and says, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," to the point where we're pretty sure that the little person has replaced Tyler in her mind as who Daddy is.
It reminds me of like my niece, like she went to my in-laws' house. They always have a Christmas tree. And we're pointing out all the ornaments. And she was like, "But where's Homer?" Because she thinks Homer Simpson, because her family loves the Simpsons. So she was looking for Homer in there. But yeah. Oh, actually, maybe I'll just say I couldn't really think of a really good, because there's just so many great things. And like I think like everybody else, it's the simple things in life that really make a difference, just a nice cup of coffee, books, and all those things. But maybe I'll just say my niece, because I think she was the one who sort of introduced me to the family. I think because I was like extremely not good with people and talking to people. And my husband has a fairly big sort of extended family. And so it was always like the scariest thing to go to those family gatherings when I don't know anyone. But, I got my niece that I can just hang on to. And somehow she just really likes me for some reason when she was young. And so I just get to I'll just spend time with this little girl. I can't talk to anybody. So she was kind of my shield for everything. Yeah, and she was sort of the first person that we told that we're gonna get married, and she was like, she had no idea what's going on, but she gave us a hug after we said it. So I'm just like, okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna say my niece, Nicole. So now that you're 20 years old, which is just like, what is happening? But yeah, I will always remember how you helped me welcome me into the family. So.
All right. So thank you everyone for sharing what you're thankful for. We're going to move on to my book. So the author I'm thankful for today is Ursula K. Le Guin. She published over 20 novels and over 100 short stories in her 60-year career, as well as poetry and translation and children's books. Despite being mostly known as an author of science fiction, Le Guin said that she would prefer to be known as an American novelist. A prize in her name was established in 2022 for a writer of imaginative fiction. I'm personally thankful for her work, as the Earthsea books were early forays into speculative fiction for me, and because her work has inspired so many other authors that I love. She's a foundational author in a foundational genre for me, and today I'm going to talk about one of her most well-known works, which I had somehow managed not to read until now. So I am going to be talking about The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. As this book opens, Genli Ai is marching in a parade. He is lucky enough to be marching with the royal retinue, and along with much of the city of Aranrung, he is marching towards the unfinished arch of the River Gate, which will open new trading possibilities for Aranrung and the whole country of Karhide. As the king lays the final keystone, mortaring it in place, Genli asks Estraven, the prime minister, why the mortar is red. Estraven replies that the tradition has been to mortar the keystone of an arch in place with blood and bone, historically human blood and bone, though now they use animals instead. The sun briefly comes out, and Genli feels hot, the last time he will feel hot on the planet Gethin. Genli Ai is a visitor to Karhide, but not just any visitor. He's an alien, a human man sent as a representative of the Ecumen, a loose coalition of 80 different planets who are interested in opening a relationship with Gethin. The most fascinating difference between Genli and the inhabitants of Gethin is that Genli has a single, unchanging sex and gender, whereas the people of Gethin do not. For most of the time, they are a single, undifferentiated sex, but a few days out of every month they enter Kemmer, a heightened sexual state where they take on randomly selected male or female characteristics, after which they return to being undifferentiated. There is no concept of biological sex or gender on this planet, as anyone can be either the birthing parent or the fertilizing parent or both over the course of their lives. Genli finds this difficult to adapt to, and persists in referring to most Gethin people as he, though he knows this makes him stereotype them in ways that doesn't make sense for their culture. Genli, on the other hand, is seen as a curiosity or even a pervert on Gethin in his constant maleness. After the parade, Estraven invites Genli over for dinner. Genli is surprised. Estraven has helped him over the past months, but he still doesn't quite trust Estraven and suspects ulterior motives. Nevertheless, he accepts his offer. When he is visiting for dinner, however, Estraven reveals that he can no longer act as Genli's go-between with the king. Genli is confused as he is scheduled to meet the king the very next day, and it seems strange for Estraven to withdraw his support so suddenly. Estraven explains that the king didn't speak to him at all during the parade, a sign that he is out of favor, probably due to his attempt to mitigate a conflict between Karhide and the neighboring country of Orgorain over a particular piece of land. Genli is frustrated and doesn't understand how something so small and terrestrial could be getting in the way of his mission to connect Gethin to other planets. Estraven warns Genli that there are people in court, including the king, who are afraid of Genli and what he represents, seeing him as a threat to their power, despite Estraven doing his best to plead Genli's case. Estraven says he will be leaving Erenrung soon, but he hopes he will see Genli again soon and ask him more questions about the wider universe. Genli doesn't quite understand and leaves the dinner feeling frustrated. The next day, when he goes to visit the king, Genli hears on the radio that Estraven has been denounced as a traitor by the king himself and has been given 3 days to leave Karhide on pain of death. The reason that he has been accused of treason is that he has been conspiring against the king, trying to sell out Karhide to a certain union of peoples that does not exist and is meant to undermine the king. Genli is then called in to see the king, just as he's beginning to panic. The king reassures Genli that he doesn't see him as a traitor, just a tool of one. But when Genli tries to discuss the matter of Gethin joining the Ecumen, he can tell he isn't getting through to the king. Genli speaks plainly, trying to show the benefits of how space travel works and what the benefits that the Ecumen would have for Karhide and the planet as a whole. But the king is suspicious. Genli explains that if things go wrong now, he can always come back in another generation due to how space travel works for the Ecumen, but this only sours the king's attitude towards him even more. Genli also explains that the Gethin people's sexual development is unique, which causes the king to ask why his people should want to deal with people so monstrously different from them. Finally, Genli is released from his audience with the king, unsuccessful, and he leaves feeling like a failure. He thinks he will eventually go to Orgorain and try to work with the government there. Genli eventually does get to Orgorain, and when he does, he finds Estraven there, having managed to use some of his political connections to secure himself a tentative position in the hierarchical structure of Orgorain. But he finds himself used there as well, and though Genli initially thinks his mission is going well, Estraven can tell that the political tides are turning against him. Eventually, Genli is imprisoned in a labor camp up north. Estraven, feeling responsible for Genli's imprisonment, hatches a plan to free him. The two of them spend time recovering in the mountains before enacting the next part of Estraven's plan, to go back to Karhide by crossing the treacherous Gorban ice, a huge glacier. The Left Hand of Darkness came out in 1969, the year of the Stonewall Riot, but it reads like something much more contemporary. It's one of Le Guin's early Hainish novels, the fourth published. In 1970, it won both the Hugo and Nebula Awards, and it sparked quite a bit of feminist debate. It's considered one of the early feminist science fiction works, and one of the first and most prominent examinations of androgyny in fiction. It's also considered to have established Le Guin's status as a major science fiction writer. The Left Hand of Darkness is a wonderful read. The prose is beautiful, and the politics of Gethin feel subtle and real. Genly's distrust of the native Gethenians is rooted in their mercurial nature, their strange relationship to sex and gender, and his slow process of coming to understand and even love Estraven is nuanced and fascinating. I loved reading this book, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to read it again to really understand it. I want to reiterate again how much I love Le Guin's prose. The way this book is structured, we see many perspectives, and not just Genly's story, but other anthropological notes from visitors to Gethin about their stories and legends, and Estraven's perspective as well. This is a story that encourages us to think about it from multiple angles and refuses to be characterized as a single thing. It's a book that feels like a work of art, and I can see why it's been so highly praised. If you want to read a piece of seminal feminist science fiction, or if you're just wanting to read something that will make you think, I highly recommend The Left Hand of Darkness by my author that I'm thankful for, Ursula K. Le Guin. So now we are going to move on to our last book friend of the day, Corrine. Corrine, what have you got for us?
And is there a BT connection to Ursula K. Le Guin? There sure is. So her short story, The One Who Walk Away from Amelas, is featured prominently in their MV for Spring Day and in the BTS universe. I can do this all day. So I also, like Sadie, had a really tough time with this one, in that a lot of the authors that I really love, Simone St. James, Kyung Suk Shin, Seishi Yokomizo, my translator Anton Her, like we talk about them all the time. And so choosing an author that I just wanted to like highlight and pour all my love into is really hard. So I decided to pour all my love into the Interlibrary Loan system because I love it so much. And with the Interlibrary Loan system, you have access to every book by every author, all of whom deserve love. I think that kind of works. But the book and author that I would like to talk about today asks the question, how can you put a price tag on art? So if we look at a Van Gogh or a Rembrandt, we intrinsically understand that this has a lot of value. It's old. There's only one of them, and there is a history and provenance behind it that gives it some sort of worth. We can understand old masters' paintings and look at them and be like, yeah, that's probably worth some money. But how do you do the same thing with modern art? There's no history. There's no kind of like intrinsic value in a pile of candy shoved into a corner. And yet we do. And sometimes those price tags are astronomical. So my question to my book friends and to my readers, and the question posed by this book, is how much would you pay for a stuffed shark? Fix a number in your mind. Now, what if I told you that this was a 15-foot tiger shark caught off the coast of Australia? Okay. And what if I told you that this piece of art was commissioned by Charles Saatchi for £50,000. So Charles Saatchi is essentially like a professional rich man, as far as I understand, and is considered like a tastemaker in the art world. So if he commissions it, it also gives it a little bit more value. And now what if I said that this piece of art was made by Damien Hirst, a very well-known British artist? This 2-ton stuffed shark is called The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living. And it was not actually done by hand by Damien Hirst. He just kind of sent instructions to the technicians to put it in the block of clear liquid. So you can ask, did Damien Hirst actually do this piece of art? Questionable. Is it art? Also questionable. But you probably can fathom that it's worth something with all of these factors in mind. So Charles Saatchi owns this piece of work, and then he decides to bring it to market. However, there are some problems. A year later, due to the techniques that they use to taxidermy the shark, it is deteriorating rapidly. It is no longer a good shark color. It is a kind of off green due to the fact that it is rotting in the epoxy. The curators have tried bleaching it, but that just made it so much worse. So eventually they had to like skin the shark in order for it not to smell anymore. And then one of the fins kind of just fell off. So it is no longer kind of like the original piece of work that it was, because the curators had to do a bunch of things to ensure that it didn't end up a pile of goo. And so you have a lot of questions when you're bringing this to market. Is it still the original piece of art? Question also, is it art? And how do you put a price tag on this? How does the art world and economics decide how much a rotting, stuffed shark commissioned by Charles Saatchi under the direction of Damien Hirst, who never actually touched it, by technicians who didn't do a really good job? How do you put a price tag on this? Well, that is up to art dealers, auction houses like Christie and Sotheby's, and a lot of other different players in the art world. And collectively, they decided that this stuffed shark was worth $12 million. So I hope you were sitting down for that, because the economics of modern art are baffling. They are incomprehensible. They are shrouded in mystery and nonsense. And so I really appreciated Don Thompson, and his job title is truly great, who's a professor and economist and holder of the, brace yourself, Nabisco Brands Chair Emeritus at the Schulich School of Business at York University in Toronto, who has taken on the, I would almost say, crushing weight of trying to explain the economics of modern art to the average person. And what I really am thankful for this particular author is that he explains it in a way that everyone can understand it. He's not talking down to you if you don't hold an economics degree. He's essentially just telling you how it is, and how it is going to make you really, really quite angry. The reality that, art doesn't have any intrinsic worth. The art is just the price that very rich people are willing to pay for it, and how that is essentially affecting how art is displayed to the community, how museums run, how we perceive the lives of artists to be, who succeeds and who fails, in kind of just like simple, plain, matter-of-fact, infuriating writing. So the book is called The 12 Million Stuffed Shark. The author is Don Thompson, who again is a Canadian author. And it's good because I have a lot of Post-it notes in it. It's good when I crack out the Post-it notes. If you've ever kind of like seen the headlines of, like a Jasper Jones selling for $17 million and wondered, why? How? Should it? This book is here to answer all of your questions. He did another follow-up, which is called the Supermodel and the Brillo Box, which, as you can pretty much assume, it's a mannequin just chopped in half, and then a Brillo box, just a Brillo box, just the Brillo box, and how much that went for. And he has also written another book, which is The Curious Economics of Luxury Fashion, which I'm very excited to read about, because that is another arena of which I simply do not understand. And he is going to explain it to you. I appreciate this kind of like pulling back of the curtain and kind of like exposing and talking about a world that is very secretive, very close-knit, and does not kind of talk frankly about the fact that they are essentially using art as an investment or a branding for themselves and their business and their marketing, and actually has nothing to do with art or the piece of art itself, and how this impacts the lives of artists themselves and people down the line. And I just think that someone who's taking a real, not looking at the value of the art, not saying that this piece means this piece means that. Essentially, everyone agrees that most of it is garbage. And they all know it's garbage. They just think that maybe like 2% of it is kind of good, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because like everything else caught in the capitalist system until the revolution comes, all of it is about what someone will pay for it. I'm quite thankful to this book for, again, not even talking about the worth of the art, just talking about the economics. He is just here to explain to you in plain, simple language how and why these astronomical sums of money are paid by people who are making, let me find one of my little post-it notes. I believe it was $90,000 an hour. So if you have kind of wandered around a museum and wondered, like, why is this art? Why is this worth so much? Don Thompson is here to kind of gently take you by the hands and say, this is why. I'm really sorry. So if you are kind of interested in the art world, if you're interested in modern art, if you're just kind of want to be a little bit glum for a weekend, because honestly, as soon as I read that $90,000 an hour thing, I was like on the floor for days and did not recover. I could absolutely recommend to you the very, very well written, very sane, very infuriating book, The 12 Million Stuffed Shark, that you can get through Interlibrary Loan, which is free, as many good things in this world are, and many other things should be.
Thank you, Corrine. That sounds utterly fascinating, and I definitely will have to check that out. So that is all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this special Thanksgiving episode of Keep It Fictional. We are all thankful for you, our dear listeners. I am thankful for my book friends. And until next time, keep reading.
Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please tell a fellow book lover about it. You can find a list of all the books we discussed in our show notes. Join us next week for another fun book chat. Until then, keep it fictional.